Independent candidate Bob Wallace is joining us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Patrice. How are you?
I'm doing well. 100,000 jobs is a pretty tall order. So how do you plan to do that, and in what time frame are we talking about?
Well, we're talking about 100,000 jobs in my first term as mayor. And as you said, there's a direct correlation between jobs and crime. So we say we have a crime problem, but in reality, our problem is an opportunity problem and an economic problem and a job problem. So my plan is to create 100,000 jobs in my first term as mayor.
So we know that small businesses create most of the jobs, a lot of the jobs. Right now, though, small businesses are hurting the most. So how do you bounce back? You're not at a level playing field with the small businesses right now. They're at a deficit. So you got to get them out of that deficit first.
Well, I think there is a deficit issue here, but there's also a structural issue. So my plan is a three-phase plan. The first plan ties into crime, grime, education, and leadership. I have over 25 years of building businesses and creating jobs in Baltimore City. Contrast that to Brandon Scott, who has no experience in that area. So I think that we have to improve the environment in Baltimore City that will keep businesses in our city and that will attract businesses to our city. Secondly, we need to have clarity on what kind of city we want to become. What does the Baltimore of the future look in terms of new industries, new technologies, artificial intelligence, blockchain, robotics, all these emerging industries that we need to win that race. And then in between those two posts, we need to have a plan that requires us to attract $1 billion of new investment in Baltimore City. I'm already out talking to people in California and Silicon Valley and New York and in Texas about coming to Baltimore, bringing their dollars, bringing their innovation, bringing their ideas to create businesses in our city. You are correct that small businesses are the driver of the economy of most urban centers, particularly in distressed neighborhoods. So my plan is to work all those areas to not only bring in $1 billion of investment nationally, but internationally. I have relationships in different countries.
Powerful, powerful. So, Mr. Wallace, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it so much.
I appreciate you.
I'm a fan. So I have a polling question that I think that will help steer the direction of the conversation for tonight and every night moving forward on Wednesday. And if you're okay with that, or would you like to start with an introduction yourself? Did you want any opening words, or would you like for me to start with the polling question to get a feel as to what the audience is interested in hearing more from you about?
Sure. No, I'll say a few words just to open this up. I mean, I know people are very busy, and this is family time for a lot of folks. But I think that the issues that we're facing as a city are that critical that I'm glad to see that people are taking this very, very seriously. I'm not sure about most people, but I'm ticked off. I really feel that our city over the last decades has become insensitive to addressing the needs of the people of Baltimore City. And I'm just sick of it. I'm just tired of it. And I think it's time for us to take back our city. So what I'm offering and what I'm suggesting here, this is not a campaign. This is not a moment. This is a movement. It is a movement to take back our city and to make it responsive to the needs of the people of the city. That's why I'm doing this and running as mayor.
That is a great answer. We're having more guests. We're in the first few minutes of the broadcast, and so I'm trying to give people enough time to get on, and at the same time I want to continue to move forward. So we're going to start our poll, and we're going to leave the poll open. And for those that there are 7 pillars that you're focusing on, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And so we want to know right now, based on the audience that's here right now, what would you like to discuss, or what is your main issue that you'd like Bob to discuss right now? And so based on the numbers or based on the polling that you put in, then I'm going to tell Bob the overwhelming result of this is majority of the individuals on here want crime and public safety, educational excellence, transparency and leadership, infrastructure, transportation and quality of life, connectedness through strategic partnerships, economic development, and job growth, or the power of faith-based communities. Because we have pastors that are hurting right now because of the COVID-19, and they're looking for leadership that has a solution or a way to solve how to gather people back together to get their, because it's sort of like a business. They still have bills. They're not exempt from bills. So they're trying to figure out, how do we get our business back up and running? So I just want you to think about your pillars, and based on the, what the majority is voting for, we're kind of like evening off here. What would be your answer to the number one concern tonight? And then we're going to have anyone that has a question in the Zoom chat, as well as a question on the Facebook Live. Taylor is there to answer those questions. Sharon is available to answer any questions inside of the chat. So far, it's looking like crime and public safety is winning the pack. So I'll go ahead and I'll keep this poll open. So as you come in, you can vote for what is your concern tonight, and Bob will address that concern in his plan for crime and public safety. So Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, it's no surprise to me that crime and public safety is the number one issue that our community is facing. I mean, every poll that we have done, and that has been done in the last 12 months in Baltimore City in this campaign, crime and public safety is number one. And for good reason, because if people are not safe or don't feel safe, then they're not going to bring their businesses here. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to raise a family here. If they don't feel safe, they're not going to, make investments into our city. And so the crime and public safety becomes a major category. So my approach to crime and public safety, as I said in the video piece that ran at the outset, the issue we have, if you peel back the onion, the issue we have is not a crime issue, right? That's a symptom. The issue is that we don't have that many people in our city have been forgotten, have been not focused on, not taken care of. There's been disinvestment in our communities, and consequently, people don't have economic opportunities. They don't have jobs. They don't have a means to earn a living and to take care of their families. I was raised in Cherry Hill, in the projects in Cherry Hill. And I can tell you, I told a story. I had 10 of my folks who were my childhood buddies that I grew up with. And, some of them went on to do great things, but there were a portion of them who made bad choices. And it wasn't that they were bad people. It wasn't that they were not intelligent people. It was just that the environment that we were raised in Cherry Hill at that time was such that we could not, that they felt there was no future for them. So because when a person feels there's no future for them, then they're going to turn to other dysfunctional ways to earn a living and to take care of their families. And so the issue is, as I said, is that the root issue is an economic issue. And so my program is to focus on, like a laser beam, how can we create an economy such that all of our people, all of our citizens have a path out of poverty, have a path to be productive, right? And so if we have that, and we have an educational system that is educating children and educating people on what to do and how to be functional, then they will be able to earn a living and not choose a life of crime. Now, ultimately, my ultimate goal as mayor is to keep the people of Baltimore City safe. So even though, you know, there's talk of defunding the police, I think that's a bad term to use. I don't think people mean it in the term that, in the way that it's used. There are some who would say, yeah, let's get rid of the police, which I think is ridiculous. But I do think that we need to reset how we do policing. We need to refocus on what works and what doesn't work with policing and with the community. And then we need to reimagine what public safety would look like and should look like in a society where every life is valued. Yes, Black lives do matter, right? And so we need to have a society where we recognize the value of all human life, of all people. And that policing strategy, the policing institution needs to reflect that. So my plan is the current commissioner, Harrison, we have met a couple of times and we've talked. I think he has a plan that if we let it work out and play out, that I think that it can work. It worked in New Orleans in a very similar situation. I think that it can work in Baltimore. What I would do as mayor is take away all the political dynamics he has to deal with and say, Commissioner, you focus on resetting, reforming, and reimagining our police force, and let me deal with the politics of law enforcement, the politics of public safety. Let me, as the mayor, let me deal with that. And I think if we can do those things, that we can provide an environment where people can be safe. I am very sensitive as an African-American man to the fact that we are losing our young people, especially young Black men. We are losing them in the streets. They're losing their lives, and we're losing valuable resources, valuable talents that could be surfacing our community. I'm very sensitive to that. And so as mayor, I would need to be able to balance all of those dynamics, with the main objective being the public safety of all the people of Baltimore City.
And how do you see, because the next thing that's popping up as the next issue that they're wanting to address is, how are you tying education in with the crime? How do you see those two working together?
Absolutely. That's a great question. So, I ask people on that question to step back, close your eyes, and dream for a moment. And what do I mean by that? Imagine we have an educational system that when our babies come in the kindergarten and they go through the school system, K through 12, and they come out in the 12th grade, and either they go to college or they go into a technical profession like carpentry, electricians, plumbers, IT technicians, solar technicians, right? So everyone doesn't have to go to college to be successful, but they come out of the pipeline that they have the skills and the training, and what's waiting for them is a job. It's a job that will take their skills, take their training, put it into business, create value, create wealth, and to build our community. What would happen to our city if that pipeline model worked the way it was designed to work? We would have reduced violence. We would have reduced crime. Our poverty rate, which hasn't changed, it's increased since Brandon Scott has been mayor. What would happen though if our people came to the educational system, had the skills, there were jobs on the back end waiting for them that they could take and earn a living, take care of their families? It would transform our city almost overnight. So there's a direct connection between education and poverty, and education and crime. I can tell you in my childhood in Cherry Hill that I had five boys in my family. My mom was a janitor, my dad was a laborer, and many of us in this meeting have most likely have similar backgrounds to what I had in Cherry Hill. We were in poverty. We didn't have many resources. But there's one thing that mom and daddy always instilled in us, and it was that if you focus on education, if you take school seriously, and if you work hard, that there's a path out of poverty for you. And despite racism, despite sexism and classism, that education is the great equalizer. And they instilled that in my brothers and myself. And so my brothers were all career military, the ones who were older. I was the first one to not go into the military, but to go to college. So I broke them, I disrupted the system in my family. But all of my brothers are successful because of that key point that mom and daddy instilled in us. And so there's a direct correlation between education and poverty, and education and crime. So if we can get the front end right, which is the education pipeline, we will almost overnight address the poverty issue and the crime issue. And that's why I think that education is a part of my top tier items. I've got crime, education, and job creation or economic development. Because if we get those three things right, and they're all interdependent, they're all interrelated, right? And we can't do one without the other. So my first 100 days is we're gonna focus on those three things: crime, job creation, and getting the education system where it needs to be to produce the outcomes that we all desire.
So I'm going to piggyback on crime and education and round it into, elaborate a little bit about your experience in the education system and how, without giving your plan, some of the groundworks that you think need to be done to enhance our education, as well as tie it into why there is a prison to pipeline going from our education system.
Absolutely. So I guess the engineer in me says that when I design a system, when I design a system, it is designed to produce an outcome, okay, that I'm trying to create. So if I'm building a manufacturing plant, it is designed to produce a product that I can then sell. So when we look at a system, there are three aspects to the system that we always consider when evaluating whether or not the system is producing the outcomes that we designed it to produce. What are those three things? They are, number one, the people that are running the system, the engineers, in this case, the teachers, the principals, the administrators. Do we have the right people in the right jobs in our educational system? That's the people. Then there's the technology, right? And newsflash to everyone on this call, I don't care what business you're in or what you do, you are running a technology business. Whether you're a teacher, a realtor, a plumber, a carpenter, an engineer, a scientist, a medical doctor, you are running a technology entity. And so technology is the foundation of everything that we do in our society today. And my question to the school system would be, do we have the technology in the places that's necessary to deliver the outcomes that we're trying to deliver? So in our classrooms, do we have Wi-Fi in all of our classrooms? Are we prepared for 5G transmission systems? Do we have laptops and computers in every desk, in every classroom? Are the teachers, have they been trained on teaching in a technical environment? With COVID-19, do they have the skills and the technology to be able to deliver training and education remotely, right? So those are the technology matters. And I can tell you in Baltimore City, we got a big gap between where we should be, where we need to be, and where we are. So that's people, technology, but the last piece that's important to focus on are business processes. That simply means, how do we do what we do, right? And being able to do it over and over again and repeat the quality of producing that particular step. So if you go to City Hall, if you go to the headquarters of the school system for Baltimore City, I've been there many times. I would argue that the business processes, the business procedures that they use to do what they do are probably about 20 or 30 years outdated. So as mayor, what I would want to do is look at those three pillars to say, are we getting the results that we think we need to get? The second thing I would do with the school system is to develop new pathways to success. New pathways to success. I talked about, some people come out and they go to college. Some come out and they become, technical people, carpenters, plumbers, electricians. Well, there's another path that I want to implement in Baltimore, and that is the path of entrepreneurship. We should be teaching entrepreneurship to our babies, right? From kindergarten throughout the K through 12 system. I believe that many of our young people, if they were groomed and trained, and there was a great deal of intentionality in our educational strategy, that many of our young people have the brains and the guts and the will to start businesses and to become successful entrepreneurs. I've written 8 books on this, and I know and believe that this is a powerful skill set that is embedded in our community, but it just hasn't been nurtured and hasn't been allowed to flourish and prosper. And as mayor, I would make sure there was a track for entrepreneurship development in our school system. So when they got out of high school, for women and young men who desire to become entrepreneurs, that they have the platform and the training to be able to do that. The other pipeline that I would produce in the school system is revolving around information technology. I believe that every student that goes through our system, when they get to the 12th grade, that they should be able, if they choose to go into an IT firm and do beginning level, entry level information technology services, computer technicians, network technicians, software developers. These are skills that if we train them K through 12, they can come out of high school, and if they don't want to go to college, they can go right into the information technology and the cyber field. So what I'm suggesting here is not that complex, folks, but it just is been a lack of leadership in our city over the last couple of decades. Now, my background, as I think you know, I'm an engineer. I'm a technical entrepreneur, technology entrepreneur. I built businesses. I've created jobs. I understand technology. I understand business. And I think that those two, technology and business, those are going to be the cornerstones of wealth creation in the new economy. And so what I'm bringing to the table is background and skills in those areas, day one, that we can then implement in our city and create a pipeline, an educational pipeline that produces productive citizens, scientists, engineers, plumbers, and so forth, versus those who go into the criminal justice system. Well, and what I would tell you this, if the system does not provide that, then the pipeline to the criminal justice system will only expand. It will only expand. So this is an imperative that has my attention and will be a major priority for me when I become mayor.
So to piggyback on the wealth gap comment that you made, I have a question that says, how do we close the wealth gap in Baltimore when there's such a high crime rate? What is your plan to close that wealth gap in Baltimore?
So if we look at wealth, right, let's step back and look at wealth. So where does wealth come from? Wealth comes from a person, a woman, a man being able to earn enough income that at a minimum meets their living requirements and has some left over that they can invest. They can invest that what's left over. They can invest it in stocks and bonds. They can invest it in real estate. They can invest it in starting a business. That will not happen unless or until the individual has the skills that society demands, that society is willing to pay them for in order so that they can build their wealth. What drives all of this jobs and wealth is business. It's business. And the current leadership, like with Mr. Scott and the other previous leaders, they look at the business community as a problem to be dealt with, right? Versus as a partner. When I was in Silicon Valley, I was mentioning how there in that culture, that entrepreneurs and engineers and people like that, they're viewed like rock stars. When they walk into the room, people applaud them because they recognize that these are the men and women that's going to transform our community. But here in Baltimore, if you're a business person, you're a problem to be dealt with, right? And you're vilified in almost every category. That has to change. That culture has to change. And so part of how we build the wealth is we have to create an environment in Baltimore City where people feel safe. So if you peel back the onion, we go back to crime. We go back to public safety. Because folks, people are not going to come to Baltimore if they don't feel safe. I moved my business from Columbia to downtown Baltimore in 2005. I have been in the city of Baltimore with my business for 15 years. I can tell you that the first 2 years when I moved from Columbia to Baltimore, it was very, very difficult. And I almost said you know what, we made a mistake. Let's go back. And why did I say that? Well, we had employees who were carjacked at gunpoint, broad daylight. Our cars were broken into consistently. We had the homeless people on our porches back in front. We have customers who are afraid to come to Baltimore to visit us because they're afraid for their safety. They love our company, they love our work, but they're afraid of Baltimore. They're afraid for their safety in Baltimore. And then to make it even more difficult, trying to attract scientists and engineers from the capital region to come to Baltimore City to work is very, very difficult. So that means that I, as an entrepreneur, I've got to pay a premium to get qualified engineers and scientists just to come to Baltimore. Now, I ask you, what business can survive in that environment? It's very, very difficult. And so this crime matter is the issue that I have to address as mayor on day one, because it impacts everything else. It impacts the schools, it impacts the jobs, it impacts businesses. So we have to figure out how to get the crime under control so that we can bring in the business, bring in the investments, so that people like you who either want to grow a well-paying job or who want to start businesses, that you have the opportunity and the pathway to do that and to be successful doing that.
Okay. And so I'm getting another question that says,
Please.
That's kind of piggybacking on the wealth gap here. They're asking, Baltimore is in need of healing, and in the midst of the worst economic downturn in its history, why are you the best choice to run this city?
That's a great question. That's a great question. And I would say I always was taught that past performance is an indicator of future performance. So I'm not going to say here to sit here and say that this is going to happen, although I believe it will, and not have you believe that that's the case. What I can say is, if you look at my record and what I have done in the past, that there's a high probability that I will be successful in the future in doing what I'm saying that I'm going to do. Contrast that to my opponent, Brandon Scott. So I would ask you, for those who live in the city, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Are you safer now than you were 10 years ago? Are there better jobs now today than there were 10 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago? And so what I'm suggesting to people is that, yes, I know that in the past, the politicians have promised you things and they've not delivered. But I'm not a politician. I'm just like you. I am a citizen. I happen to be an engineer, entrepreneur, businessman. This is my first time in politics. I have no hidden agenda here. All I want to do is make Baltimore what it used to be, a great city and a better city for us. And I'm willing to step out there to make that happen. But if I look at the challenges that we're going to face, for example, so next year, you all may know this, next year, they're projecting a deficit in Baltimore city government of over $100 million. Over $100 million. We're already struggling financially. Now, because of COVID and the pandemic, we are facing a deficit of over $100 million. So how will we deal with that? How will we manage that? Well, as a businessman, what I would do as mayor, because of my training and my background, I will go to the balance sheet of Baltimore City. And I will do what's called balance sheet financing. So for example, not to make this complicated. So if you look at the balance sheet of Baltimore City, we have about $4.5 billion of assets that are on the books that we own today, right? What if we can do a sales leaseback approach, right? To free up some of the assets to get cash flow into the city of Baltimore government that was specifically targeted towards empowering our neighborhoods and our people. See, so there are financing options that we have today, but if you don't have a business mind about those things, you look right past that asset and not leverage it. So I think my experience as a as a person who has executed on strategy. We've put together a wonderful team, folks. We got a great team of people from all over the country in engineering and in education and in public safety and in energy. So we've got a really great team of people that I would bring with me to City Hall day one, right, to address the different issues facing our city. So I understand the apprehension from the public about politicians, and I share that, and that's why one reason I'm running is because I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. I'm tired of it. I'm mad about it, and we want to take it back. So I'm here to help us take it back, take back our city.
So I'm going to ask you a two-part question.
Please.
So based on the perception of Baltimore, the question is, how do you plan on improving the public relationship perception of Baltimore? And if someone, just kind of piggybacking on your last statement, me being an angel's advocate here, not a devil's advocate, but an angel's advocate, how would you address the naysayers that would say, they might take that last statement that you said as you're going to take the assets and sell them and put us more in debt? People hear what they want to hear. Somebody might heard what you said as saying, you're going to take our assets and sell them to give us more money, to put us in more debt, to do other things. How would you address that in what they thinking politicians do? So how would you improve?
Yeah,
public
I didn't.
relationships?
Yeah, that's a great point. And maybe I didn't do a very good job explaining that.
Okay.
What I was suggesting is what's called a sales leaseback.
Okay.
So let's say that I own a parking garage, and let's say that parking garage on the books is worth $100 million. So what I would do is I would sell that to a investor company or to a bank or whatever. They would pay me $100 million, right? And then they would, and then we would lease back the asset from that entity. So over by leasing it back over a 20-year or 30-year time frame, that asset comes back to the city of Baltimore. So I'm not going into debt. What I'm doing is I'm freeing up physical assets to give me liquid assets or liquid cash that I can then use to build my city. And over that 20-year or 30-year time period, that garage reverts back to Baltimore city government. It comes back to my balance sheet. So when I say sales leaseback, that's not a debt situation. That is me freeing up physical assets to get cash that I can use to run my city and to help my citizens. But over the long term, that parking garage, in this case, would come back to the city. Does that help?
It does. It sounds like you're making money, making our assets make us money in the city.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So for example, in my business, when I'm looking to expand my company, one way I can do that is if I have assets on my book. Let's say I have land, or I have equipment, I have machinery, I have factories. I can lease those assets out, get cash into my business, grow my business, right? But lease back the asset so that at the end of that lease, that asset is back on my books. It's the same thing in the city. It's the same dynamic.
Okay, so now this is the portion of the town hall meeting, because every town hall meetings have microphones, right? So they allow people to talk to you. And so I didn't want the audience to think that this was all about Bob telling his plan and you can't talk to him, he's untouchable, because that is not the purpose of this. We want people to know, and we're trying to build this up. If you have a question, you can come right in here every Wednesday at 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. and ask Bob your questions. Once we do the poll and we find out what's the more, what the room is wanting to hear, we allow you to express your opinion first, and then at the end, like around now 7:30, 7:40, we're going to allow people to, as they asking questions, Sharon's making sure that they they're asking a question that's geared towards what you're talking about, as well as their concern, and you're going to talk to them. And then after that, we're going to open the mic up for Taylor, and she's going to, because the people on Facebook Live, they're seeing this in a little bit of a delayed reaction, but they can't talk to you, right? The only way that they can talk to you on Facebook Live is if they're in they got to join our group, and they got to get that meeting notification, and that's how they're going to be able to actually talk to you. But Taylor is there she's writing down questions. I saw her, and she's going to answer those questions. She's going to ask you so you can answer. But right now we're going to open up the segment so that the people that are on the call can ask you questions. So I think Mickey has a question. I'm going to scroll and unmute him. Mickey, we are not allowing video because it helps with the streaming not to be so choppy. So if you can just go ahead, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask Bob your question, and then I'll mute you back so he can answer.
So Bob, it's Mickey, and
Mickey, I'm sorry.
Barbara is on this call, Barbara Moses, and I think she's a skeptic, and I would like you to reach out to her personally and see what questions she might have.
Okay.
Okay. So
I think that's the Tom Moses account.
Yes.
I'm gonna unmute
okay, so is I don't see a Barbara on here.
the Tom here.
Yeah.
Okay, you got him? Okay. So let's
Barbara.
back out. Okay, Barbara, are you here?
I'm here. I'm not a skeptic. I just don't know anything about you. So, and I'm a friend of Mickey's. I just really signed on to hear more about what you had to say.
Sure. Well, I'm not sure when you got on. I mean, I'm a Baltimore.
We've been on the whole time.
Okay. Well, I'm a Baltimore native, born and raised in Cherry Hill. One of 5 boys. Went to school through the Baltimore school system. Went to Polytech High School, and then from Poly went on to study engineering at UPenn. Left Penn, worked in corporate America, worked at DuPont, Procter & Gamble, IBM. Went to graduate school for my MBA at Dartmouth in New Hampshire. Came back to Baltimore after graduate school to put roots down into Baltimore City. So I built a couple of businesses primarily in technology. So I built an IT company, built an energy company, and a media company that coaches and nurtures entrepreneurs all over the world. Written 8 books on that topic of entrepreneurship, urban economic development. Love the city, love Baltimore. I have supported the political class in Baltimore and in the state for 30, 40 years, both Republicans and Democrats. And I'm at a point now in my life where I just feel that Baltimore's on the wrong track. We're moving in the wrong direction. We're smaller, we're poorer, we're less safe. So we're just going in the wrong direction. And I think that for us to think that, if we always do what we've always done, that we will always get what we've always gotten. And so we keep electing this leadership that comes from the same pipeline and same culture, and we keep thinking it's going to be a different result. And I think that we're mistaken with that. And so what I'm suggesting is that a better way would be to try a different path, a different approach, a non-politician, somebody who understands business and knows how to execute on strategy and how to create jobs, to give someone like that a shot at leading our city and see if they can move the needle. What I do know is what we've been doing for the last few decades has not produced the results that we need. And so for that reason, I am running. So I love Baltimore. I love the city, but I'm ticked off about it. I'm ticked off about how we've been treated, how we're performing as a city. You probably saw a report that says we were one of the worst run cities in America. We were ranked 128th out of 150 cities, top 150 cities. So we're going in the wrong direction, and we keep going to the same leadership model that has failed us in the past. And I'm suggesting that we should reconsider that and try something different.
And Barbara, I'm going to piggyback on your question and ask you, First, did Bob answer your question about knowing a little bit about him? And if you can just elaborate a little more about what's important to you. And I'm gonna unmute you so you can answer that.
Sure. Well, I guess first I need to say I live in the county, but I love Baltimore. I'm born and raised here. So I can't vote for you, but I love this city. I guess first question is, do you have a good relationship with the governor? Because, you know, I think that the mayor of the city has to have a good relationship with the governor because some amount of funding that we need is driven from that relationship.
Absolutely.
And I work with kids in foster care so I have a relationship that crosses into the city by virtue of what I do. And I see issues, I hear what you talk about, and I see issues being so baseline, like the food deserts, needs for people with drug abuse issues, mental health issues,
Yes,
education issues, and they are so baseline that I think your theories of entrepreneurship and teaching this in schools is fabulous, but the needs are so baseline that they have to be addressed at such a basic level before any of these broader scale ideas can even be put in place. That I'm not sure how those get started.
sure.
You know, where these great ideas, how they get implemented before we even can get food in people's homes.
Yes, absolutely. Those are great questions, ma'am. And they are, I mean, that's the $1 million question. Well, let me answer the governor question first. So the governor and I are very close. I've known Larry for over 25 years. We worked together and helped him when he was working for Governor Ehrlich. And I've been on various commissions that he's asked me to serve on, such as the Board of Regents for the USM and the Maryland Economic Development Commission, on Kennedy Krieger Board. I was on the Gilman Board for a while, Workforce Development Board. So I've been very involved, very engaged in the community. But what you just articulated is exactly one of the biggest challenges that we face. And that is, how do we expand this pie versus shrinking the pie, and at the same time meet the needs of our most vulnerable citizens? And I would suggest that it's neither or, it's both and. I would suggest that it would be a mistake for me as mayor to become mayor and to only focus on the physical needs that you talked about, the mental illness, the hunger, the food deserts. All of these are real major issues. But if I cannot build an economy that produces tax contributors, people who put into tax donors, I call them tax donors. So we have tax donors and we have tax consumers. So we have people who put taxes into the bucket, and then we have people who consume those dollars. If I have more tax consumers than I have tax donors, then I am operating in a deficit that will destroy this city. So what I have to do as mayor, or what anyone has to do as mayor, they have to balance that. And I don't think that it's either or. It has to be both and. I've got to be able to expand the pie economically, and at the same time be intentional and be creative about meeting, as you said, ma'am, the physical needs of the most vulnerable of my citizens. And that is a balancing act. And I don't think there's a definitive path that we can lay out now and say, this is how we're going to do this. I don't think anyone can do that. But I do believe that we can be intentional about realizing we need to expand the pie. I think what people like Brandon Scott are attempting to do, the pie is shrinking because people who have money to invest, they are voting with their feet. They're leaving the city. The businesses are leaving the city. So if I have no economy in the city, if I have a shrinking pie and I have shrinking tax donors and I have increasing tax consumers, that is not sustainable. And that's what will happen to Baltimore City if we don't build the economy. So what I'm suggesting to you, ma'am, is I'm very sensitive to the needs of our most vulnerable citizens. I mean, we were raised in poverty. I know what it feels like to go to bed hungry at night. I know what it feels like to not have heat in the winter. I know what it feels like to not have clothes to wear to school. I get it. I get it. But I also understand if I don't expand the pie and build the economy, I'm not going to have resources to help my citizens who are most vulnerable. So ma'am, it's a balancing act that I'm going to have to walk in order to build Baltimore City. But I'm very sensitive to that need that you outlined.
Great questions, Barbara. And we're down to our last 12 minutes. So here's what I know. I got to give the people on Facebook Live a chance for Taylor to at least get some of their questions done. But that's the reason why we have an hour and a hard stop. And I know the next question will be, so how are you going to create that deficit? And that involves creating jobs. So we're going to talk about that next week, next Wednesday. We'll hopefully address the job piece, the plan you have, and how you're going to bring that money in. That's why we played that tape this morning, not this morning, but right before we started. So that gives everybody a filler on where we're going, the direction one next week. So you want to be on this call because if you're not employed, this is one of the plans you want to hear. So there's questions popping up. I can't read them and facilitate. So I'm going to let Taylor take over because we got our last 10 minutes. And I want to dedicate that to Facebook Live for those that didn't get the link. It was in the group, so we're going to rebroadcast this. So if you missed it because you were busy, we're going to rebroadcast this so you'll know next week at 7 o'clock to be on here so you can talk to Bob, and we'll get within this hour as many questions as we can solve. But we want to address the main concerns based on what you're asking for. So we'll poll every time, and Bob will address that first because we wanted him to at least get his plan out, and then we'll engage, and then we'll start doing the questions, the Q&A. So go ahead, Taylor, your turn to take Facebook Live over.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So the first question that I think is very valid coming out of live is a question specifically geared towards the middle class in Baltimore. So the specific question is, do you have a plan to lower property taxes and water bills so that the middle class can try to build wealth? I know a lot of conversations we've been having recently are around, two extremes of the spectrum. How do we address the crisis and the immediate needs, and also the big business and attracting these dollars to the city? But what about the middle segment, the everyman who's still hanging in there, still believes in Baltimore, and is kind of like paying the price for a lot of these systemic inefficiencies due to kind of some of the failures of past leadership?
Absolutely.
So the question is, okay.
Sure. Yeah, Taylor, thank you. So that's a great question because the tax situation in Baltimore City is not sustainable. Our property tax rate, as you guys probably know, is double that of the surrounding counties. So what I plan to do in terms of my tax strategy is to implement a system that will get our property taxes in line to be competitive with our surrounding counties, which means that we'll have to cut it in half. Because right now we are double what the surrounding counties are. Now, some people say, well, that can't be done. Well, I disagree with that. I talked to you earlier about my idea about balance sheet financing for the city as a tool. I didn't talk about my relationship with the governor in terms of getting resources from the state of Maryland in order to help Baltimore City to get to that transition where we get our tax rate more in line and more competitive with the surrounding counties. I didn't talk about my federal government relationships in terms of bringing federal resources to Baltimore City, regardless of who's president. So I'm not a Trump fan. You guys probably saw my press release where I endorsed Joe Biden for president. But if by some way Trump becomes president, one of my first calls as mayor, one of my first meetings as mayor is to meet with President of the United States and say, how can we work together to make Baltimore great and to make our city where it needs to be? So I have no skin in the game on this. It's about what's best for Baltimore City. But the tax policy and the tax dynamic in our city will be a high priority for me, because we've got to protect and we've got to expand the middle class in Baltimore City. What's happening now is young people in middle class families, they start having children, and because of the school system, because of the crime, they leave Baltimore City and move to the surrounding counties. We have to find a way to keep them in Baltimore City. And part of that is the tax policy and getting it more in line, more competitive with the surrounding counties.
Awesome. Good answer. Oh, well, I think that's a good answer. I hope that answer satisfies your question. I'm going to hopefully get out 2 more, but we'll see. What are your thoughts on community policing? Specifically, do you have any ideas or initiatives on how to better support community collaborations with law enforcement?
I think that we need to reset law enforcement. We need to refocus it and reimagine it. And so that means that there are requirements that currently the police are having to deal with that they should never have to deal with. Things like dealing with the homeless, or with mental illness, or with family to family disputes. The police are being asked to police in matters that they should not have to. So I'm talking about putting in auxiliary services, for example, to work in line with the police that would address, if there's a homeless issue, that auxiliary group would be responsible for that. If there is a homeless, or there's a mental illness issue, that where someone is having mental illness problems, and there's an auxiliary resource that is joined with the police, but they become the first respondents to those matters versus the police. If you look at the police, the George Floyd and the other cases like that, usually it starts with a minor thing, a traffic stop, someone selling cigarettes, or something small and minor, but then it escalates because the police are not trained. They're not trained to deal with those issues. So what I would do for community policing is to engage an auxiliary resource to handle a lot of the issues that police are handling today. The second thing I would do, as part of our plan, is to move the police to have police officers living in the communities in which they serve. When I was a kid in Cherry Hill, we saw the police. They walked around our neighborhoods. They had what's called the Police Athletic League. They coached us in our sports teams. We had a relationship with the police. We've lost that along the way. So part of my job as mayor is to rebuild that relationship and to build systems that will allow that relationship to build.
Awesome. I think I can squeeze in one more question because it's very important. I'm gonna go for it.
Please.
So there's been a lot of rhetoric around, the city needs a business person. At the same time, if we look at the last business person to enter into a position of power, specifically Trump, a lot of people are left unsatisfied with the direction that mindset has taken the country. So what makes your skills as a business person, what about those skills qualify you to be a politician or a leader of the city?
So I've always said that success in business or in any area, success only serves to amplify the character of the person that's already there. So if you take a business person who has weak character, who has low morals and ethics, and you put success on top of that, you're going to get a successful person who does bad things. But if you take a businesswoman, a businessman who has been successful, but who has a moral foundation and has a track record to prove that, then that man, that woman is probably going to give you a different result as a leader. So I think the damage that Mr. Trump has done is he has tarnished the image of business leaders in many, many ways. And I would ask the public just to take a step back on that and say, wait a minute, he's only one person. There are lots of business women and businessmen who have been successful, who have resources, but who are highly ethical people and who care about our country and about our communities. So do not take one example and assume that everyone else is like that, right? That's kind of, that's just crazy. So I do believe that if you look at a person's track record, what they've done in the past, I mean, we've taken money and we've gone to the emerging world in Africa and other countries, and we've put up money in building orphanages and churches and schools. We've helped businesses get started in those countries as well as in Baltimore and around the country. So look at my track record, look at what I have done, and use that as an indicator of what I'm probably going to do once I'm mayor. I think that's the best indication.
Great answer. I mean, I'm down to my last 1 minute, Bob. I mean, an hour goes so fast.
It does.
And at the end of the day, it's almost like, we only touched 2 pillars. We haven't even touched everything that you have a plan
It's a
for,
lot.
right? And so this is so important for other people. We're using this platform for people to get to know you. And I have a hard stop at 8 o'clock. So I'm gonna go ahead and hand it over to Taylor. We're gonna post this video again in Facebook and all the social medias. So if you're watching this after the fact, you want to be in on this conversation. You want your questions to be heard. You want to talk to Bob. So when you go to the polls, you're knowledgeable about who's running for the mayor, not looking at a picture and say, I see that many posters, so that's the one I'm going with. So you want to get involved, and that's why we're doing this. That's why we're engaging. So Taylor, I'm going to let the exit video. Bob, is there anything you want to close with? And then Taylor's going to play our exit video.
So, Tarsha, I just want to thank everyone again for taking time out this evening. And I just want to reiterate that this is not a campaign. This is not a moment. This is a movement. And I'm asking everyone on this call, if you are sick and tired of being sick and tired, then I'm going to ask you to join this movement for us to take back the city and make it what we all want it to be. And I hope you'll join us.
Thank you. Taylor? So she's gonna play our exit video, and after the video, we're gonna end the call. So there will be no more talking.
Thank you, Tarsha. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thank you everyone for being on the call today.
Thank you.